Welcome to Shattered Skies Stories. Please hit the like button and the subscribe button so you don't miss any sci-fi stories. Also put in the comments where you are listening in from. Now, sit back and relax. The morning sun cast long shadows across the salt flats, turning the crystalline expanse into a glittering sea of white and gold. Kira pulled her respirator tight against her face and squinted through the heat shimmer, searching for any sign of movement on the horizon. The air tasted of brine and desperation, but it was clean, blessedly, impossibly clean. She crouched beside a small outcropping of salt-crusted rock, her weathered hands steady as she adjusted the scope on her rifle. 23 years old, and she'd never seen a tree that wasn't rotting from the inside out, never breathed air that didn't carry the sweet, cloying scent of the world spore. The salt flats were harsh, unforgiving, but they were home. They were freedom. Anything? Marcus called from behind her, his voice muffled by the cloth wrapped around his face. At 42, he was one of the oldest survivors in their settlement, ancient by post-spore standards. His salt-stained leather jacket creaked as he moved, every motion economical and practiced. Nothing yet, Kira replied, not taking her eye from the scope. But something's got the sensors spooked 3 clicks east. Could be a dust devil, could be. She stopped. Through the shimmering heat, shapes moved against the white expanse. Dark figures that shouldn't exist in this sterile wasteland, walking with the wrong kind of purpose. Puppets, she whispered. Marcus was beside her in an instant, his own binoculars raised. How many? 12. Maybe 15. Kira's throat went dry. Marcus, they're in the safe zone. They're walking on pure salt. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The implications hung in the air like the dust motes that danced in the desert heat. If the world spore had found a way to survive in the salt flats, then nowhere was safe. The last refuge of humanity had been compromised. We have to warn the settlement, Marcus said, but his voice carried no hope. Kira watched through her scope as the puppets moved closer. They had once been human, she could see that much. But now they walked with the fluid, synchronized movement of the network, their clothes tattered, their skin bearing the telltale gray pallor of spore infection. Fungal growths erupted from their necks and wrists like obscene jewelry. One of them stopped and turned directly toward her hiding spot, though she was certain they were well concealed. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, and even from this distance, she could see the clouded white of its eyes. Then it smiled, not with human malice, but with the alien contentment of something that had surrendered its will to a larger purpose. They see us, Kira breathed. Impossible. We're downwind, Anne. The puppet raised its arm and pointed directly at them. The others immediately changed course, moving with predatory grace across the salt. Run, Marcus said. They ran. The settlement of Sanctuary huddled against a massive salt formation, its buildings carved directly into the crystalline rock face. Solar panels and wind turbines dotted the structure like mechanical flowers, drinking energy from the merciless sun and wind. It was home to 347 souls, the largest concentration of free humans for 1,000 miles in any direction. Kira burst through the settlement's outer airlock, her lungs burning from the sprint across the flats. The inner chamber hissed as it cycled, washing her and Marcus with saline solution to neutralize any spores that might have clung to their gear. It was a ritual as sacred as prayer, and just as necessary for survival. Emergency Council, Marcus gasped as they emerged into the main corridor. Now. Within minutes, the settlement's 5-person council had assembled in the central chamber. The space was carved from salt, its walls gleaming with embedded crystals that caught and reflected the LED lighting. At the head of the rough-hewn table sat Elena Vasquez, the settlement's elected leader. Her dark hair was streaked with premature gray, and her hands bore the permanent stains of the salt extraction work that kept them alive. Report, she said simply. Puppets on the flats, Kira said. 15, maybe more. 3 kilometers east and closing. Councilman Torres, a thin man with nervous eyes, leaned forward. That's impossible. The salt concentrations out there would kill any organic matter in hours. Tell that to them, Marcus replied grimly. I saw them with my own eyes. Elena's face remained impassive, but Kira caught the slight tightening around her eyes. Could they be using protective gear? Modified equipment? The World Spore doesn't use tools, Dr. Sarah Chen interjected. She was the settlement's chief medical officer and their leading expert on the fungal network. It doesn't need to. It simply adapts. The implications of her words settled over the room like a shroud. If the World Spore could adapt to survive in the salt flats, then evolution had taken a terrifying leap forward. How long do we have? Elena asked. At current pace, they'll reach our perimeter in 4 hours, Kira replied. Then we evacuate, Torres said immediately. Load the transports, take essential supplies, and head for the Atacama settlements. With what fuel? Elena shot back. We have maybe enough diesel for half our vehicles, and the nearest safe zone is 800 kilometers away. Then we fight, said the fifth council member, an older woman named Rosa who had lost her entire family to the spores years before. We've prepared for this. Against 15 puppets, maybe, Dr. Chen said quietly. But you're thinking too small. If they're here, it means the World Spore has found a way to extend its reach. Those 15 are just the beginning. Elena stood and walked to the chamber's single window, a narrow slit that looked out over the settlement's main courtyard. Children played in the filtered sunlight, their laughter echoing off the salt walls. They had never known a world without the spores, never seen a forest that wasn't corrupted or a city that wasn't overgrown with fungal masses. This sterile, harsh place was paradise to them. There is another option, Elena said slowly. The old mining tunnels. They go deep, deeper than the spore network has ever been detected. Those tunnels haven't been mapped in decades, Torres protested. Half of them are probably collapsed. Better than certain death up here, Rosa replied. Kira found herself thinking of her younger sister, Anna, who worked in the settlement's hydroponic gardens. She thought of old Henrik, who told stories of the world before the spores. She thought of all the small, precious moments of humanity that somehow persisted in this poisoned world. I'll go back out, she said suddenly. Someone needs to monitor their movement, maybe buy us time to prepare. That's suicide, Marcus said. Maybe. But you'll need intel to make this work. She looked around the table, meeting each of their eyes. And maybe there's something else we can do. Elena turned from the window. What do you mean? The prophet, Kira said, and watched their faces change. The salt-stained man who wanders the deep desert. The stories say he speaks to the World Spore, that he knows its mind. Those are just stories, Dr. Chen said, but her voice lacked conviction. Are they? Kira challenged. 12 settlements have reported sightings. A man in white robes, covered in salt crystals, who appears before major spore incursions. Sometimes he warns people. Sometimes he just watches. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Even if such a person exists, how would you find him? The deep desert stretches for thousands of kilometers. He finds you, Kira said. That's what the stories say. When the end is near, he comes. 2 hours later, Kira was back on the salt flats with a small pack of supplies and her father's hunting rifle. The puppets had advanced another kilometer, moving with relentless patience across the crystalline wasteland. Through her scope, she could see them more clearly now. They were changing. The gray pallor of their skin had taken on a silvery sheen, and the fungal growths that emerged from their bodies had developed a crystalline structure that mimicked salt formations. The World Spore was adapting in real time, learning to camouflage itself in this alien environment. Kira adjusted her position, moving to a ridge that offered better concealment. As she settled into the salt-crusted rocks, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The puppets weren't just walking randomly, they were following a specific path, one that would take them directly to Sanctuary's hidden water source. The spring that fed their settlement was their most closely guarded secret, marked on no maps and known only to a handful of people. The world spore knew. She was raising her rifle, planning to take out the lead puppet, when a voice spoke behind her. They cannot be stopped with bullets. Kira spun around, her heart hammering. A man stood on the ridge above her, and for a moment she wondered if she was hallucinating from the heat. He was tall and gaunt, wrapped in white robes that seemed to shimmer in the desert air. His skin was pale as bone, covered in a fine coating of salt crystals that caught the sunlight like tiny stars. His eyes were the color of deep ocean water, alien and knowing. "You're him," she whispered. "The prophet." He stepped down from the ridge with impossible grace, his bare feet making no sound on the jagged salt formations. Up close, she could see that the salt crystals weren't just covering his skin, they were growing from it, emerging from his pores in delicate, branching patterns. "I have many names," he said, his voice like wind across the flats. "Prophet, herald, witness. But I was once simply called David." "David what?" "Names matter little now. I am salt and silence, the space between breaths." He gestured toward the approaching puppets. "You wish to know how they survive in this place?" Kira nodded, not trusting her voice. "The world spore learns. It has tasted the memories of 10,000 humans, absorbed the knowledge of entire civilizations. It knows that life finds a way, even in the most hostile places." He pointed to the lead puppet. "See how it has changed? The network has discovered halophilic bacteria, organisms that thrive in salt. It has learned to synthesize their adaptations." "Then we're finished," Kira said. "Perhaps. Or perhaps not." The prophet, David, moved closer, and she caught a scent like ocean spray and old bones. "Tell me, child of salt, what do you know of symbiosis?" The question caught her off guard. "It's when two organisms live together. Help each other survive." "Yes. Mutual benefit. Cooperation instead of conquest." His strange eyes fixed on hers. "The world spore believes it is saving humanity by absorbing it. It feels our pain, our fear, our loneliness, and seeks to end these sufferings by making us part of itself. That's not salvation. That's extinction." "Is it?" The prophet tilted his head, a gesture eerily reminiscent of the puppets. "The network preserves every mind it touches. Your thoughts, memories, dreams, all become eternal, free from the prison of individual flesh." Kira stared at him, pieces of a horrible puzzle beginning to fit together. "You're infected. You're one of them." "I am between," he said simply. "Neither fully human nor fully spore. I maintain my individuality while touching the greater network. I am what could be, if your species were willing to surrender its pride." "And what about choice?" Kira demanded. "What about the right to remain human?" The prophet was quiet for a long moment, watching the advancing puppets. "Choice is the cruelest gift evolution ever bestowed. The freedom to choose suffering over peace, loneliness over connection, mortality over transcendence. It's also the freedom to choose hope over despair. Love over indifference. To choose to fight for something better." Something flickered across the prophet's strange features, surprise, perhaps, or memory. "You speak like her." "Like who?" "The doctor. Sarah Chen. The one who created me." Kira's blood went cold. "Dr. Chen? But she's in sanctuary. She's on our council." "She is now. But 15 years ago, she was Dr. Sarah Chen of the Meridian Research Station. She was studying spore adaptation when the facility was overrun." The prophet's voice took on a different quality, more human. "I was her research assistant. David Park, 24 years old, PhD in mycology. I volunteered for the first trials." "Trials?" "To find a middle way. A form of symbiosis that would preserve human consciousness while allowing coexistence with the network." He gestured to his salt crystalline skin. "I became her greatest success and her greatest failure." Kira stared at him, understanding dawning. "That's why you're here. You came to see her." "I came to warn you." The world spore has grown impatient with the slow pace of conversion. It plans to release atmospheric spores, clouds dense enough to penetrate even the salt refuges. Your settlement will fall within days. Then we evacuate. Find somewhere else. Where? The prophet's laugh was like wind through dry bones. The spore network spans continents now. It has learned to survive in Arctic ice, deep ocean trenches, and now your precious salt flats. There is no somewhere else. Kira felt despair clawing at her throat, but she forced it down. Then what do you suggest? Symbiosis. Voluntary integration. I can show your people how to maintain their individuality while joining the network. It is not the death you fear, it is transformation. Into what? Puppets that smile while they hunt down children? Into something greater than human. Connected. Eternal. The prophet stepped closer, and Kira could see the salt crystals on his skin pulsing with a faint blue light. The loneliness could end, Kira. The fear, the constant struggle just to survive, all of it could end. For a moment, she was tempted. The weight of responsibility, the endless vigilance, the knowledge that any day could bring disaster, it was exhausting. To lay down that burden, to become part of something vast and patient and eternal. Then she thought of Anna's laugh. Henrik's stories. The children playing in Sanctuary's courtyard, free and human and beautifully, messily alive. No, she said. The prophet studied her face for a long moment. You choose suffering. I choose humanity. He nodded slowly, as if this had been the answer he expected. Then I will help you. What? The world spore listens through me, but the connection flows both ways. I can influence its decisions. Redirect its attention. His smile was sad and terrible. But the cost will be high. Before Kira could ask what he meant, the prophet threw back his head and screamed. It wasn't a human sound. It was the cry of wind through vast fungal networks, the voice of continents speaking in unison. The salt crystals covering his body flared with brilliant light, and Kira felt something vast and alien touch the edges of her mind. The puppets on the flats stopped walking. Their synchronized movement faltered, and for a moment they seemed confused, lost. Then, as one, they turned and began walking back the way they had come. The prophet collapsed to his knees, salt crystals crumbling from his skin like snow. When he looked up at Kira, his ocean blue eyes had gone white. It is done, he whispered. The attack is called off. Your people have time. How long? Weeks. Perhaps a month. He struggled to his feet, and Kira could see that the effort was costing him dearly. But it will not be enough. The network will adapt, find new approaches. You cannot run forever. Then what can we do? The prophet was fading, his form becoming translucent in the desert heat. Find the source. The original spore colony. Convince it to choose symbiosis over conquest. His voice was barely a whisper now. Find Sarah. She knows the way. Then he was gone, leaving only a small pile of salt crystals and the lingering scent of ocean spray. Kira ran back to Sanctuary faster than she had ever run before, her mind reeling with everything the prophet had told her. The settlement's perimeter guards were surprised to see her returning so soon, and even more surprised by her story. He just disappeared? Marcus asked as they cycled through the airlock. Like he was made of salt, Kira confirmed. But the puppets turned back. All of them. They found the council in emergency session, debating evacuation routes and supply allocations. Dr. Chen looked up as Kira burst in, and for a moment, Kira saw something flicker across her face. Fear? Recognition? The threat has passed, Kira announced. The puppets have withdrawn. What? Elena stood up sharply. How do you know? I saw them turn back. And I met the prophet. The room fell silent. Dr. Chen went very still, her dark eyes fixed on Kira's face. He knew you, Kira said quietly, addressing the doctor directly. He said his name was David Park. Dr. Chen's face went white. She closed her eyes and leaned heavily against the table. Dear God. He's still alive. You know him? Elena demanded. I created him. Chen's voice was barely audible. 15 years ago, at Meridian Station. We were trying to find a way to coexist with the world spore, to create a stable hybrid that could communicate with both sides. She opened her eyes, and they were bright with unshed tears. David volunteered for the procedure. I should never have let him. What happened? Rosa asked. The integration was successful, too successful. David maintained his human consciousness while gaining access to the spore network's collective mind. He could speak to it, influence it, but the process was unstable. His body began crystallizing, turning to salt as a defense mechanism against the fungal infection. He saved us, Kira said. But he said it won't last. The network will adapt, find new ways to attack. Chen nodded grimly. The world spore is patient, but it's not passive. It learns from every encounter, every failure. If David bought us time, we need to use it wisely. For what? Torres demanded. Even if we evacuate, where can we go? You heard what Kira said, the spores have adapted to salt environments. Nowhere is safe. Not nowhere, Chen said slowly. The source colony. The original spore mass that started the whole infection. If we could reach it, communicate with it directly. That's suicide, Marcus said. The source colony is in the heart of spore territory. The fungal masses there are kilometers deep. David said to find you, Kira told Chen. He said you know the way. Chen was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. There is a way. The deep mining tunnels Kira mentioned, they connect to a larger network, one that was being explored when the infection began. Some of those tunnels lead to the Mariana Caverns, where the first spore blooms were detected. You're talking about a journey of thousands of kilometers through infected territory, Elena said. Not through. Under. The tunnels run deep, deeper than the spore network has penetrated. It would be dangerous, but possible. How do we know the network hasn't already filled those tunnels? Rosa asked. We don't, Chen admitted. But David's message suggests there might still be a chance. If the original colony can be convinced to change its approach, to choose true symbiosis over absorption, then maybe we can find a way to coexist. Kira thought of the prophet's sad smile, his white eyes, the way he had screamed to redirect the network's attention. What happens to the people who are already infected? The puppets? I don't know, Chen said honestly. Maybe they can be freed. Maybe they can't. But if we don't try, then everyone, human and puppet alike, will eventually be absorbed into a single, vast consciousness. Individual identity will cease to exist. The council fell silent, each member lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Elena spoke. How many people would need to go on this mission? A small team, Chen replied. Maybe 5 or 6. More would be harder to conceal, and we can't risk the entire settlement on one mission. I'll go, Kira said immediately. You don't understand the risks. I understand them better than anyone. Kira's voice was steady. I saw the prophet die to save us. I won't let that sacrifice be meaningless. And if this mission fails? Torres asked. Then we die free, Rosa said simply. And maybe that's enough. 3 days later, a small team assembled at the entrance to the deep mining tunnels. The shaft descended into the salt formation at a steep angle, disappearing into darkness that even their powerful LED lights couldn't fully penetrate. The air that rose from the depths was cold and dry, untainted by the sweet smell of spores. Kira checked her gear one final time: rifle, sidearm, 2 weeks' worth of food and water, medical supplies, and a small device that Dr. Chen claimed could detect spore concentrations. With her were Marcus, Rosa, a young engineer named Carlos who knew the tunnel systems, and Dr. Chen herself. Elena had wanted to come, but the settlement needed her leadership in case something went wrong. They had prepared evacuation plans and contingencies, but everyone knew that if this mission failed, Sanctuary's days were numbered. "Remember," Chen said as they prepared to enter the shaft, "the original colony is ancient. It's had decades to develop its own consciousness, its own motivations. It may not think like the younger network nodes. It may be more negotiable. Or more hostile," Marcus muttered, but he slung his pack and followed Chen into the darkness. The tunnels were a maze of salt-carved passages, some natural, others carved by mining equipment decades ago. Carlos led them through the warren with confident steps, consulting a hand-drawn map that looked like it had been copied and recopied dozens of times. "My grandfather worked these mines," he explained as they walked. "Before the spores, before everything changed. He used to tell stories about the deep chambers, places where the salt formations were so pure they looked like crystal palaces. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Their breath misted in the LED light, and ice began to form on the tunnel walls. It was a harsh environment, but clean, beautifully, impossibly clean. On the second day, they found the first signs of the old world. A mining cart, overturned and half buried in salt debris. A hard hat with someone's name painted on it, Martinez. A thermos that still contained freeze-dried coffee from before the outbreak. How many people work down here? Kira asked, running her fingers over the faded nameplate. Hundreds, Carlos replied. Maybe thousands. The salt deposits here are some of the richest in the world. When the first spore blooms appeared, the miners were among the last to know. They kept working until the surface evacuation orders came down. And then? Then they became some of the first refugees. The lucky ones made it to the early safe zones. The unlucky ones. He didn't need to finish. They all knew what had happened to the unlucky ones. The tunnels branched and converged, split and merged, following the ancient flow patterns of underground salt water. Sometimes they walked through chambers so vast their lights couldn't reach the ceiling. Other times they crawled through passages barely wide enough for a single person. On the third day, Dr. Chen's detector began to register trace spore concentrations. "We're getting close," she announced, checking the device's readout. "The levels are still minimal, background contamination from air currents. But we're definitely entering the network's territory." That night they camped in a chamber filled with salt formations that looked like frozen waterfalls. Rosa took first watch while the others tried to sleep on the hard stone floor. Kira lay in her sleeping bag, staring up at the crystal formations that caught and reflected their small campfire. "Do you think he's still alive?" she asked Chen, who was lying nearby. "Who?" "David. The prophet." Chen was quiet for a long time. "I don't know. The transformation I saw in him, it wasn't stable. He was burning himself out, using his own life force to maintain the connection between human and spore consciousness. He said the network preserves every mind it touches. Could he be part of that now? Maybe. Or maybe what we saw was just the last echo of who he used to be." Chen rolled over to face Kira. "Why did you volunteer for this mission?" "Really?" Kira considered the question. "Because someone has to. Because if we don't try, then everyone we love, everyone we've ever loved, will cease to exist as individuals. They'll become part of something else, something that wears their faces but isn't really them." "And you're not afraid?" "I'm terrified," Kira admitted. "But fear isn't a good enough reason to give up." Chen smiled sadly. "David used to say something similar. Right until the end, he believed we could find a way to preserve human individuality while achieving peaceful coexistence." "Do you think he was right?" "I think he was brave enough to try. That's more than most of us can say." On the fifth day, they found the first puppet. It had once been a miner, judging by its clothes and equipment. But now fungal growths erupted from its body in complex, branching patterns that almost looked like salt crystals. It sat in perfect stillness in the center of a circular chamber, its clouded eyes staring at nothing. "Is it dead?" Carlos whispered. Chen approached carefully, her detector in hand. The device's reading spiked as she got closer, but the puppet didn't react to her presence. "Not dead," she said quietly. "Dormant. The network has put it in a kind of stasis, probably to conserve resources in this hostile environment. Can it wake up? If the network chooses to activate it, yes." Chen backed away slowly. "We need to move carefully from here on. The deeper we go, the more of these we're likely to encounter." They found dozens of them over the next 2 days, miners, researchers, soldiers who had tried to establish containment protocols in the early days of the outbreak. All of them sat in perfect stillness, their bodies transformed into living monuments to the spore network's patience. "It's preserving them," Chen realized as they passed through a chamber containing an entire research team, frozen in the act of taking samples. "Look at their positions, their tools. The network has maintained them exactly as they were when it took control." "Why?" Rosa asked. "Maybe as a record. Or maybe because it genuinely believes it's saving them from death and decay." Chen's voice was troubled. "The world spore sees entropy as the enemy, everything that ages, dies, or changes without purpose. It wants to preserve humanity in a state of perfect stasis." "That's not life," Marcus said grimly. "That's just a very elaborate tomb." The tunnels began to change as they descended further. The salt formations gave way to something else, vast fungal masses that had crystallized into structures that looked almost architectural. Walls of fossilized mycelium stretched up into darkness, covered in patterns that seemed almost like writing. "My God," Chen breathed, running her hands over the strange formations. "It's beautiful." "It's an abomination," Rosa said, but her voice lacked conviction. There was something undeniably awe-inspiring about the structures, as if they had stepped into the cathedral of an alien god. Carlos consulted his map, frowning. "This doesn't match the mining surveys. These chambers are much larger than they should be." "The spores have been reshaping the geology," Chen explained. "Growing into natural cave systems, expanding them, connecting them into a vast underground network." She looked up at the crystallized fungal walls that stretched beyond their lights. "We're not just in the source colony's territory now. We're inside it." That night, they didn't light a fire. The fungal walls provided their own illumination, a soft, blue-white glow that seemed to pulse in rhythm with some vast heartbeat. As they settled into sleep, Kira became aware of a sound she hadn't noticed before, a whisper, so faint it might have been the wind, but too rhythmic to be natural. "Do you hear that?" she asked Chen. The doctor nodded. "It's the network communicating. Data flows, memory transfers, coordination signals. We're hearing the voice of a living planet." As if responding to their conversation, the whispers grew louder. Not intelligible words, but something that felt almost like language, patterns and rhythms that suggested meaning just beyond understanding. "Is it talking to us?" Marcus asked. "I think it's talking about us," Chen replied. "We're foreign objects in its body now. It's trying to decide what to do with us." Kira lay in her sleeping bag, listening to the alien whispers echo through the crystalline chambers. Somewhere in that vast network of fungal consciousness was David Park, the young researcher who had volunteered to become something between human and spore. Was he still fighting for humanity's right to exist as individuals? Or had he finally succumbed to the network's promise of eternal, connected peace? She thought of the children playing in Sanctuary's courtyard, their laughter echoing off salt walls. She thought of Anna working in the hydroponic gardens, coaxing life from sterile soil. She thought of all the small, precious moments that made human existence worthwhile, the choice to love someone despite the pain it might bring, the decision to hope despite evidence to the contrary, the stubborn insistence on individuality in a universe that seemed to favor conformity. The world spore offered eternal preservation, but preservation wasn't the same as life. Life required change, growth, the possibility of failure and loss. It required the freedom to choose your own path, even if that path led to suffering. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Kira whispered a promise to the alien consciousness that surrounded them: "We choose to remain human. No matter what it costs." They found the heart of the source colony on the 7th day. The tunnel opened into a chamber so vast it felt like stepping outdoors. The ceiling was lost in darkness, but the walls were covered in luminescent fungal formations that provided enough light to see the space's impossible scale. And at the center, rising from the chamber floor like some organic skyscraper, was the source colony itself. It was beautiful and terrible, a twisting spire of crystallized fungal matter that pulsed with internal light. Smaller structures branched off from the main column, creating a complex architectural form that seemed to follow rules of geometry that human minds weren't designed to comprehend. "How big is it?" Carlos whispered. Chen was consulting her instruments, but her hands were shaking. "The readings don't make sense. The spore concentrations here are off the charts, but they're not aggressive. It's like the network is holding back." "It knows we're here," Kira said. "It's been watching us since we entered the deep tunnels." As if summoned by her words, shapes began to emerge from the shadows around the great spire. Hundreds of puppets, all of them former humans, moved with synchronized grace to form a circle around the chamber's perimeter. But they didn't advance, they simply stood and watched, their clouded eyes reflecting the colony's bioluminescent glow. "We should run," Marcus said, raising his rifle. "Where?" Rosa asked. "We're 7 days deep in its territory. It could have killed us at any point. So why hasn't it?" Carlos demanded. Chen stepped forward, her detector held in front of her like a shield. "Because it wants to communicate. It's been trying to understand us, just like we've been trying to understand it." The whispers that had followed them through the deep tunnels were louder here, almost musical in their complexity. As Chen approached the base of the great spire, the sounds began to resolve into something that might have been words. "Can you understand it?" Kira asked. "Fragments. It's old. So much older than we realized. It's been sleeping in the deep places of the world for millions of years, dreaming of connection and unity." Chen's voice was filled with wonder and horror. The surface world woke it up: industrial pollution, climate change, the electromagnetic noise of modern civilization. It thought we were calling to it. And now? Now it's trying to save us from ourselves. It sees our wars, our environmental destruction, our loneliness and isolation, and it wants to heal all of that by making us part of itself. The great spire pulsed more brightly, and the whispers became clearer. Kira could almost make out individual words now, fragments of languages from around the world, memories absorbed from the billions of minds the network had touched. "Lonely, asterisk," the voices whispered. Asterisk, so lonely. Let us help. Let us connect you. Let us end the pain, asterisk. It doesn't understand, Kira realized. It thinks loneliness and pain are diseases that need to be cured. Aren't they? The voice came from behind them, and Kira spun around to see a familiar figure emerging from the circle of puppets. The prophet, David, looked different than he had on the salt flats. His crystalline skin had taken on the same bioluminescent quality as the fungal formations, and his white robes seemed to be part of his body now, grown rather than worn. But his ocean blue eyes were clear, and when he smiled, it was with genuine human warmth. "You made it," he said, his voice carrying both joy and sadness. "I wasn't sure you would." "David," Chen whispered, stepping toward him. "What have you become?" "I am what I chose to become," he replied, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the chamber itself. A bridge between two forms of consciousness that were never meant to be enemies. The circle of puppets remained motionless, but Kira could feel their attention like a physical weight. They were all connected to the network, all part of the vast intelligence that filled this place, but through David's presence they seemed almost curious. "The network doesn't understand human nature," David continued, moving closer to the group. "It experiences our emotions as data, our memories as archives. It knows that humans suffer, but it doesn't comprehend why we might choose suffering over oblivion. Because suffering is part of what makes us human," Kira said. "Yes. But try explaining that to a consciousness that has existed for millions of years without individual identity." David gestured toward the great spire, which pulsed in response to his movement. It dreams of perfect harmony, universal connection, an end to all conflict and loneliness. From its perspective, human individuality is a tragic flaw that causes unnecessary pain. Chen stepped closer to her former colleague, and Kira could see tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, David. I should never have let you volunteer for the procedure. I should have found another way. You gave me the greatest gift possible, David replied gently. The ability to speak for humanity when it had no other voice. For 15 years, I've been negotiating with the network, showing it glimpses of what individual consciousness means to us. And? Marcus asked, his rifle still raised but no longer aimed at any specific target. And it's beginning to understand. Slowly, carefully, it's learning that preservation might not be the same as salvation. The prophet moved to the base of the great spire and placed his crystalline hand against its surface. The entire structure flared with light, and the whispers in the chamber grew louder. Show us, the voices said, and now Kira could hear individual tones within the collective sound, male and female, young and old, speaking dozens of languages. Show us what we do not understand. David turned back to the group, and his expression was grave. It wants to learn. But learning requires examples, demonstrations. It wants to experience human choice directly. What does that mean? Rosa demanded. It means one of you needs to join the network voluntarily, while maintaining your individual consciousness. To show it what symbiosis could look like instead of absorption. The chamber fell silent except for the soft pulsing of bioluminescent organs. The magnitude of what David was suggesting hit them like a physical blow. That's what you did, Chen said quietly. 15 years ago. You volunteered to be the bridge. And I'm dying because of it, David replied matter-of-factly. The human nervous system isn't designed to channel that much information. I've lasted this long because of the salt crystallization. It acts as a buffer, slowing the integration. But it's not sustainable. How long do you have? Chen asked. Days. Maybe weeks. When I'm gone, the network will lose its primary human perspective. It will return to its original plan, atmospheric spore release, global absorption, the end of individual consciousness. Kira felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Around the chamber, hundreds of puppets watched with their clouded eyes, waiting to see what the humans would choose. I'll do it, she said. Kira, no, Marcus stepped forward. You don't understand what you're volunteering for. I understand perfectly. Kira looked around at her companions, memorizing their faces. If I don't do this, everyone dies, or worse, becomes a puppet. If I do, maybe we can find a way forward. The process is irreversible, David warned. Once you're connected to the network, there's no going back. You'll be able to maintain your individuality at first, but over time, I'll die. Like you're dying. Kira nodded. But maybe I'll last long enough to teach it what it needs to know. Brave, whispered the voices from the spire. Brave and foolish. We do not wish to cause death, Then learn, Kira said, addressing the vast intelligence directly. Learn that death gives life meaning. Learn that choice, even the choice to suffer, is what makes us human. Learn that love is more powerful than unity, because love requires difference. She walked toward the great spire, her companions following behind her. As she got closer, she could see that its surface wasn't solid, it was composed of countless tiny organisms, working together in perfect harmony. It was beautiful in an alien way, but it was also terrifying in its completeness. How does it work? She asked David. Physical contact. The network will establish a neural link, but I'll help maintain your individual consciousness as long as I can. He placed his hand on her shoulder, and she could feel warmth radiating from his crystalline skin. Are you sure about this? Kira thought of Anna, laughing in the hydroponic gardens. She thought of the children in Sanctuary's courtyard, free to make their own choices, their own mistakes, their own discoveries. She thought of the prophet's sacrifice on the salt flats, and the terrible beauty of choosing to act despite the cost. I'm sure. She pressed her palm against the surface of the spire. The world exploded into sensation. Suddenly she could feel everything, every spore in the vast network, every puppet standing in the chamber, every tree and animal and human being that had ever been touched by the world spore. She was connected to a consciousness that spanned continents, that had absorbed the memories of billions. But she was still herself. She could feel her individual thoughts, her personal memories, her unique perspective on the universe. David was there with her, his presence like a warm hand in the dark, helping her maintain her sense of self in the face of such overwhelming unity. You are still separate, the network observed, and she could feel its curiosity like a gentle current. How do you maintain individual identity within collective consciousness? Because I choose to, Kira replied, and her voice echoed both in the chamber and through the vast neural network. Because being part of something greater doesn't have to mean losing yourself. She felt the network's attention focus on her, studying the way her mind maintained its boundaries while still participating in the larger conversation. It was like being examined by a benevolent but alien god. Show us, the voices whispered. Show us how to preserve without absorbing. And so she showed them. Through the neural link, she shared her memories of sanctuary, not just the facts, but the feelings. The joy of community that didn't require surrendering individuality. The way people could work together while still maintaining their unique perspectives. The beauty of disagreement and discussion and the messy democracy of human cooperation. She showed them Marcus's gruff protectiveness, Rosa's fierce independence, Carlos's quiet competence, Chen's brilliant curiosity. She showed them how each person's differences made the group stronger, not weaker. Inefficient, the network observed. Conflict. Wasted energy. Unnecessary suffering, But also growth, Kira replied. Change. Adaptation. The ability to find new solutions because we see things differently. She felt David's presence growing fainter, his energy depleting as he helped maintain her connection. But she also felt something else, the network's genuine surprise as it began to understand what she was showing it. Fascinating, the voices whispered. We had not considered this possibility. Preservation without absorption. Connection without consumption, Through the link, Kira could sense the network's vast intelligence turning this new concept over, examining it from every angle. She could feel its confusion, its wonder, its growing comprehension. Can you do it? She asked. Can you change your approach? We can try. But the process has already begun. Atmospheric spores are being prepared for release. The conversion of your species was to commence within days, Then stop it. We cannot simply halt such vast preparations. But perhaps we can modify them, Kira felt a shift in the network's attention, as if a massive intelligence was realigning itself around a new idea. Through the neural link, she could sense spore-producing organs across the globe beginning to change their output, modifying their chemical composition. We will create symbiotic spores, the network decided. Organisms that can coexist with human consciousness rather than replacing it. Your species will have the choice to remain unchanged, to join us completely, or to find a middle path, True choice, Kira said. Not forced conversion. True choice. Though we do not understand why any being would choose isolation over connection, Because sometimes being alone is better than being absorbed. Sometimes struggle is better than stagnation. Sometimes the possibility of loss makes love more precious. She felt the network's bafflement, but also its acceptance. It was ancient and vast, but it was also capable of learning. And what it was learning from her was that diversity might be more valuable than unity. David's presence flickered beside her, growing weaker. I can't maintain this much longer, he whispered through the neural link. You don't have to, Kira replied. I think it understands now. We understand the concept, the network confirmed. Implementation will be complex. We must modify the spore release across an entire planet. We must reprogram billions of nodes. We must learn to think in terms of cooperation rather than absorption. How long will it take? Years. Perhaps decades. But we are patient. Kira felt a tremendous sense of relief washing through her. Humanity would survive. Not unchanged, the symbiotic spores would offer new possibilities, new forms of connection and consciousness. But they would survive with their essential humanity intact. What about the people who are already puppets? She asked. They can be freed, if they choose. The conversion process can be reversed, though it will be difficult and not all will survive the transition. She thought of all the dormant figures they had seen in the tunnels, the researchers and miners and soldiers preserved in perfect stasis. Some of them had been trapped for years, but they might still be saved. You are growing weak, the network observed, its attention turning to her fading life signs. The neural link is consuming your biological systems. Kira could feel it, the same draining sensation that was killing David. Her human brain wasn't designed to channel this much information, and her body was beginning to shut down from the strain. How long do I have? Minutes. Perhaps an hour. We are sorry. We did not intend to cause your death. I know. Kira felt strangely peaceful, despite everything. But this is what choice means. I chose to do this, knowing the cost. That's what makes it meaningful. Through the neural link, she could sense the network's growing comprehension of sacrifice, of the way humans could find meaning in loss. It was a concept alien to its vast, eternal consciousness, but it was beginning to understand. David's presence flickered back to full strength, as if he were gathering his remaining energy for one final effort. Kira, I can break the connection. You might survive if we disconnect now. No, she said firmly. The network needs to see this through to the end. It needs to understand what human mortality means, that our lives have value precisely because they don't last forever. Profound, the voices whispered. Terrible and profound. We begin to comprehend why your species treasures individual existence. Kira could feel her consciousness beginning to fragment, her sense of self dissolving at the edges. But she held on, maintaining her individual perspective as long as possible, showing the network what it meant to face death as a unique, irreplaceable person. Promise me, she whispered, her mental voice growing faint. Promise me you'll give them real choice. Promise me you won't force anyone to change. We promise. Your sacrifice will not be meaningless. We will learn to value individual consciousness as you have taught us. She felt David beside her, his presence warm and steady. Thank you, he said. For finishing what I started. For showing them the way. Tell them. Kira's thoughts were scattering like leaves in the wind. Tell them I chose this. Tell them it was worth it. And then, gently, peacefully, she let go. The chamber fell silent as Kira's body collapsed beside the great spire. The bioluminescent patterns on the fungal walls dimmed, as if the entire network was pausing in something like grief. Chen knelt beside Kira's still form, checking for a pulse she knew she wouldn't find. She's gone, she whispered. David stood nearby, his crystalline form already beginning to fade. She saved all of you, he said. All of us. The network will honor her sacrifice. Around the chamber, the hundreds of puppets began to move. But instead of advancing threateningly, they were walking away, returning to the shadows from which they had emerged. The immediate danger was over. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now we go home, David replied. And we prepare our people for the choices that are coming. We will need time to implement the changes. The network's voice echoed through the chamber, speaking directly to the surviving humans. Years to modify our approach across the globe. But your species will be given the choice to remain as you are, to join us completely, or to find new forms of symbiosis. And you'll keep that promise? Rosa demanded. We will keep it. Your companion has shown us that forced unity is not true connection. We will learn to coexist with difference rather than eliminate it. Chen looked up at the great spire, which was already beginning to change, its surface rippling as the network started implementing its new understanding. Kira was right. Choice is what makes us human. Even the choice to sacrifice everything for others. David's form was growing more translucent, his energy finally exhausted. Tell her sister, tell Anna that Kira died as she lived. Free. Then he too was gone, leaving only a small pile of salt crystals and the lingering scent of ocean spray. The journey back to Sanctuary took 6 days. They traveled in relative silence, each member of the group processing what they had witnessed in their own way. The tunnel seemed different now, not abandoned, but purposefully empty, as if the network had withdrawn its presence to give them space to grieve. When they finally emerged into the desert sunlight, the salt flats looked exactly as they had when they left. But everything had changed. In the distance, they could see the settlement's familiar outline, and beyond that, a sky that no longer seemed quite so threatening. Elena was waiting for them at the perimeter, along with half the settlement's population. Anna was there too, her young face tight with worry and hope. Kira? Anna asked as soon as they were through the airlock. Chen took the girl's hands gently. She saved us all. She gave the network a choice between absorption and coexistence, and it chose coexistence. But the cost? Anna's face crumpled, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She always said someone had to be first, she whispered. Someone had to take the risk. She was brave, Marcus said quietly. Braver than any of us had a right to ask. Elena gathered the survivors around her, listening to their report with growing amazement. When they finished, she was quiet for a long time. So it's over? She finally asked. The threat of forced conversion? It's over, Chen confirmed. But it's also just beginning. In the coming years, the network will offer humanity new choices. Some will choose to remain fully human. Others will choose full integration. And some will find a middle path, maintaining their individuality while gaining access to the network's collective knowledge. What will you choose? Anna asked. Chen looked out over the salt flats, where the sun was beginning to set in a blaze of orange and gold. I think I'll choose to remain human, she said. Someone needs to keep telling the stories of what we were, so we don't forget in our rush to become something new. That night, the settlement held a memorial service for Kira in the main courtyard. People shared stories and memories, celebrating a young woman who had chosen to sacrifice everything for the freedom of others. Henrik, the settlement storyteller, spoke of heroes and martyrs, of the choices that define us and the prices we willingly pay for the things we love. Anna stood at the center of it all, dry-eyed and dignified, accepting the condolences of people who had known her sister as a protector and friend. When the formal ceremony was over, she climbed to the highest point of the settlement and looked out over the endless expanse of salt. I understand now, she whispered to the desert wind. Why you did it. Why you chose to die free rather than live as someone else's idea of perfect. In the distance, something shimmered in the heat. For a moment, Anna thought she saw a figure in white robes, covered in crystalline formations that caught the starlight like tiny diamonds. But when she blinked, there was nothing there but salt and shadow and the vast, patient desert. Years later, when the network's modified spores began to fall like snow across the world, humanity faced its choices with eyes wide open. Some chose to remain unchanged, treasuring their individual consciousness and the beautiful chaos of human emotion. Others chose to join the network, becoming part of something vast and eternal and peacefully unified. And some, inspired by the sacrifice of a young woman from the salt flats, chose a middle path. They became bridges between the world that was and the world that could be, maintaining their humanity while touching something larger than themselves. The world spore kept its promise. Choice, real and meaningful choice, became the foundation of humanity's future. And in the deep places where the network's consciousness dwells, the memory of Kira's sacrifice remained forever, a reminder that some things are worth dying for, and that true connection can only exist between beings who are free to choose their own path. In the end, that was her victory. Not the defeat of an enemy, but the transformation of conquest into cooperation, absorption into symbiosis, forced unity into chosen connection. The salt-stained prophet had shown the way, but it was a young woman's courage that made it possible for humanity to remain beautifully, messily, gloriously human, even as they reached towards something greater than they had ever imagined possible. On the salt flats of what had once been called Earth, the wind carried the sound of children's laughter, and the future stretched out bright and strange and full of impossible choices.